My end.
Good afternoon. You are live with Amanda Marino and Dr. Chris Duquette. Did I say it correctly?
You did say it correctly.
Amazing. I'm trying to hit the go live on the Instagram. Oh, it's working. Love that. Amanda Marino with Next Level Recovery Associates, the owner, and this is Recovery Solutions. And I have a guest, Dr. Chris Duquette, on here for those that just joined on Instagram. Were you able to connect your Instagram to this or no? If not, we can add you in clips afterwards.
Maybe add me on. I see a button for stream this to your audience, but I'm always afraid to click a button and go somewhere totally different.
I totally get it. That's why I signed in early to make sure that or signed in late early. Um, okay, so Dr. Chris Duquette and I, which is the beautiful thing of this world today, we met on Instagram and just kind of have organically built a connection. And, I just shared with you that you're someone who came in not that long ago and came in hot and is making an impact pretty quickly. And that is not easy to do on Instagram these days. And that's just because you're authentic and you're you and you have a lot of great wealth of knowledge. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself to everyone and share who you are and what you do.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hi, Amanda. So glad to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Chris Duquette. I am a psychotherapist who works out of California, specifically Huntington Beach, California. I have offices, so I see clients in person and virtually within the state. I'm also a professor. And I teach the next generation of helpers. So I work with people in master's level counseling programs, MFTs to be, and the next generation of nurses. Because I'm an introvert, so I can only see so many people for my social bandwidth, and so I like working with the next generation of helpers. And Amanda, like you, I'm really passionate about people, particularly women, getting educated so that they can help their communities and help themselves.
Yeah, I love that. And so many people were commenting on our preview of this event, like very excited to see you and hear more of you. And there's something about authenticity and vulnerability and just the kind of content you're putting out that's very attractive to people like me that are seeking the path of healing, right? And that you just keep being yourself and sharing your wealth of knowledge, like you're just going to continue to grow that. And so I'm just really excited for you. I can't wait to see where this goes for you, and I'm super grateful that we're on here together. So
Yeah, it's great to connect when I see people who are working through their own stuff and committed to, again, helping communities, helping other people, because that's how I think we work through pain, right? Is we figure out how to make some purpose from it. I always get excited. I love this work. I was drawn to this work I know you spoke with Bronwyn a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of us, there was a great conversation that ensued about people finding kind of their path later in life. And I didn't even go back to school until I was 40. So, being able to come to something later and find a way to make purpose. I love connecting. Thankfully, social media, it's got its downsides, right? But it's made our world so much bigger. And finding like-minded people is a lot easier.
yeah, it is. And it's like there was this thing I shared a while ago, like no one supports you and loves you more than an online friend you never met. It's hysterical because when we know people, we have preconceived notions or we know their humanisms, but when don't know someone on social media, you don't know all their stuff and you see what you see. And we take that as 100% full face value. But yet when we know people, we're so much more critical and judgmental.
Yeah, isn't that funny? I find sometimes we're social creatures. We want acceptance. We want to be liked. I think I worry about people if they don't have a little bit of that. But I find sometimes in person, there's so much image management that comes up. And I know, at least for me, in the online social media spaces, it's actually a little easier for me to be myself than maybe a job interview or a blind date or even trying to meet new friends locally. It's sort of like there's a big sea of people. You either like me or you don't, and I'll find the people that do. So I actually think that sometimes these communities can help with authenticity.
Yeah, it does for me. Like if you would have told me years ago, like pre-pandemic, we built just so you know, like Next Level Recovery Associates was built at the beginning of the pandemic. Like we started in January 2020, literally like on paper we're a business in March 2020. So I had to build my whole business in a crisis and online. And this is a field that, generally was all in person everything. And so like I had to shift to this, but if you would have told me that I would actually build meaningful, true relationships from afar. Like I have these three friends that usually pop on: Ronnie, Meg, and Yanni. Yanni lives in Canada. Meg and Ronnie are from LA, but they live in Boston now. We first all hung out in London in November, but we had a year-long friendship via text message and support and different challenges we were trying to do together for a year. And like we really have a solid friendship. So like if you would have told me that stuff years ago, I'd been like, no way, I'm an in-person person. Like but it's actually real. It actually is true. Beautiful.
Amanda, do you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert?
Well, my whole entire life, I was extrovert. So I was someone that I remember 4 years old, my mom told me I would jump on the stage at like the show with the Polynesian dancers and start dancing. Like I was that extroverted. So in the time though of coming into my 40s and going through some of the things I've been through, I like alone time a lot. So I like people and connection, but more particular and not large mass groups. And if I do large mass groups, like a large event, I have to take space and time away, as to where that never was the case for me before.
Yeah.
So I'm like an extrovert that needs introvert. I need space to continue.
Yeah. I call myself an extroverted introvert because I learned to be extroverted to get over my social anxiety and shyness. So I chat. People are like, you can't be an extrovert. You're so chatty. And I'm like, no, I chat when I'm nervous to build
Yeah.
connections so that I can relax. And that's one thing I love about social media is like when I need space, like you, when I need to recharge. I love people. I love conversations, but I need time on my own to sort of bring that battery back up to full. Is I can check in on Instagram and social media, and I can connect with my friends all over the world at any different time. And then I can put my phone away if I've had too much and,
Yes.
go meditate or do something, pet one of the animals. And so I think this medium is so good for those of us who kind of toggle with both. I like to be the stage on the stage sometimes and hold court and help educate people, but then I like to connect to and step away from it.
I completely relate to that. And people assume with me, because of like I've been was in entertainment, and because I come off a certain way, that I am super all the time extroverted. I spent so many years showing up to everyone's everything and showing up and like overdoing and over group eventing, that it burned me out to where like I don't have the bandwidth or capacity anymore for it. I just don't. I can't.
Yeah.
I like to be home in my neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah. So we have this topic, which is pain, the catalyst for growth. So can I ask, I asked you like some topics, and this is what we chose. Like, what does this topic do for you, and like why this topic?
I love this because I think, we're humans and we are, as I always say, we're social creatures, and we carry around these big supercomputer brains attached to these, rabbit-like little nervous systems that can go haywire at any given time. We are primed to seek pleasure and avoid pain. And it's really a normal part of life, right? Like some of us have, deeply rooted childhood trauma that we're working through. Some of us have, kind of the big T traumas, some of the little T traumas. Most of us, I don't know that anyone that I've ever had a real conversation with hasn't had a pretty significant experience of pain, whether it's addiction, again, childhood trauma, loneliness and isolation, rejection. Most of us have had those moments. And I think one of the things our culture doesn't do a really good job at is talking about pain and suffering. So we go through it sort of anew, each person, and we think we're the only one, or we think we're alone. And I think that, For me, of course, I specialize in trauma. I'm a generalist and a specialist. I do work with myriad mental health disorders, transitions, all those things, anxiety, depression, substance use issues. But crisis and trauma are my specialties. And so, because I've worked with a lot of deeply injured people, because I am a deeply injured person
Uh-huh.
who's had to kind of come back from a lot of pain. I have seen how we can kind of get out of that feedback cycle of pain, kind of be getting more pain, and dig ourselves out and make meaning of it. And for me, it's therapy in my 20s was transformative, which is why I'm a therapist, because it worked for me. So I believe it can work for other people.
Yes.
And
Power
I
therapy.
see, yeah, it's like, and so when we work with people that are deeply injured and trying to reclaim their lives, I think we get the perspective, right? We see people at their worst when they are just on the struggle bus, and then we see where they can transform. And so for me, it's such a big, interesting topic, because we all have pain and most of us don't know what to do with it. And we don't know. I mean, it isn't until we dig out. Like I've dug out of mine for the most part, and I'll probably dig in again at some point.
I
I
out
I
is the
hold
way.
right. And so we get to see people at the other side. And I always tell people, I don't know how to do everything, certainly, but one of the reasons why I'm a therapist, why I like doing that work, is I can let you borrow my hope, because I get to see people who are as bad as you, if not worse, get better and be meaningful contributors to their communities and change their lives, completely reinvent themselves. So I can use my hope. You can borrow some of it, because I know that we can help you get there, even if you're
Absolutely.
not sure.
Yeah, and you're sharing, you have the professional as well as you're sharing the personal. And I think that's so valuable. I mean, that with that, when I see this topic, it brings me like a million thoughts in my mind of all the things that have hurt, that I didn't know how I was going to get through them, and then realize in the healing process, okay, what you learn from it. The healing process itself is such a learning experience. You learn so much about who you are, and then the if you're open to it and do the work, the what comes on the other side. And it's happened to me so many times now that even in that moment of desperation, I cling on to knowing, okay, I've been through some really tough things in my life.
Mhm.
Always ends up being okay and better or different or whatever that's more aligned for me. I hang on to that hope because I've seen it
Well, that's
many
That's
times.
the resilience piece, right? And that is the thing, until we have gone through some things, a lot of the things we believe about ourselves are untested. I think I could get through something like this. I think I could manage. But when you actually have to, you're like, okay, that was awful. I never want to do that again. And, I got through it. And I think that's one of the good things about getting into I'm 50. And I know for me, like, oh, I miss being 20, like for 5 minutes, and then I don't. And that's one of the things that I think comes, certainly some people get it younger, but after 40, I think for a lot of us, it's that feeling of like, I've been through some stuff, and like,
Yes.
it's hard, but it also helps me know that, like, I can't predict what I'm going to go through later on, but I have a core sense in myself that I will be able to handle it. I may not be the person I need to be to handle it in this moment, but I wasn't the person I needed to be in any of those moments. That's how I grew, was going through some things and having to figure it out. Sometimes white knuckling, right? Like,
Yeah. And one thing for me, and like maybe you could speak to some of this, is like I was conditioned in my healing journey of like being in, trauma recovery, mental health recovery, substance use disorder recovery, to always find a solution, right? So there was this problem, this is a solution, this is how I get out of it. Then there came a time where I realized, oh, not like I got into this mindset of like, okay, this is what's wrong, this is how I fix it. Sometimes there's no fixing it. Sometimes the fixing it is just sitting through the pain. And that's the hardest thing for someone like me to do. I want to make it better because I'm a fixer. And I want to make it better because I know how to do this thing, right? But I don't know how to do this. So the sitting through the pain is the hardest, but most profound and beautiful stuff there is.
It is so tough. I mean, it is probably the thing I struggle the most with as a parent, as a partner, even as a therapist. Like, I find myself sometimes like moving to the solutions so quickly because I know, at least I think I know. Also, I get anxious and I want to help people feel better. And in spite of all my training, sometimes I'm like, oh, this person feels awful. Like, I want to help them feel better quickly. And I move into that myself. In spite of being a therapist, I'm very much a cerebral person. I
Mhm.
remember my first experience of therapy, and all of my clients and patients have heard of Barb, my initial therapist. She was my long-term therapist in my 20s. And I would be talking about something painful, probably tear up a little bit. And then I'd move right up into talking about it, trying to fix it, saying I didn't want this person impacting my life. I didn't want to hang on to the past. And I remember Barb would tell me, like, hey, Chris, let's see if we can just stay there a minute, in the feeling. And it was so uncomfortable. And I
It's
know I had to build.
new. It's like, uh-uh. I know how to fix. I don't know how to sit.
I think you tell me if this was your experience at all. And I still go through it way less so than before, but I think in my 20s, and I think we have similar but not the same trauma backgrounds. But there's some overlaps from what I've picked up on your story. I had that feeling of if I start crying, if I start feeling, I'm never going to stop. And I'm
Yes.
not going to be able to move forward. And I don't remember if it's Maya Angelou, but there's a quote that says, every storm runs out of rain eventually. And I had to experience pain and really let those feelings to realize, like, wow, if I just cry about it and, sit in my own stuff for a while and feel sorry for myself, whatever it is that I need to do, feel angry, it really it really runs out pretty quickly if you actually sit there with the anxiety, with the fear, with the pain. And then, those of us that are solution oriented, then we can get ourselves up, dust ourselves off, girl, go wash your face and then go do the stuff. But I found for me, if I move into action too quickly, the anxiety, the pain, it just follows around like a little dark cloud on the side. But it's something I have to go back to.
Yeah, you miss the healing. If I miss the healing, I'll speak for myself. I miss the healing if I jump right into a solution. I don't get the perks of the catalyst for growth, right? Like the topic,
Yeah.
I miss that. And yeah, with me, it was very similar to what you shared. I was scared. I'm scared of my emotions a lot of times because they're very deep and intense, which is I've learned how to harness them, and I love heart, and I have a heart of gold, and I like, I'm grateful for how I feel today, but at the same time, sometimes I'm scared that my feelings are too much for me and too much for others because they're so intense. So sometimes I'd rather not open that can of worms, like you said. Like, I don't want to cry. I don't want to, like, I'll cry over everything now. Everyone knows me knows I literally cry. And my ex-husband called me the ice princess. I didn't feel
Mhm.
for years. I was super extroverted. I was go, go, go. I showed up for everyone in the world. I did all these things except for feel myself and my feelings in my own life. I did everything on the outside and was like disconnected inside.
Yeah, it's really hard to tune into yourself. And again, I think that sometimes, it can be trauma. It can just be temperamental, right? I have one of my children is so much like me and such a little sensitive, empathetic, good at reading people person. And as far as I know, she never had trauma, raised in the same house with parents who love each other and have a pretty good relationship overall. And she's wired the same as I am. So sometimes I think it's trauma, and then other times I'm like, this is just how I'm wired. I know I really, I've always been told I'm too much, too sensitive, to this, to that. So I had a lot of those feelings of like, I'm not sure anyone could handle this. Some days I can't even handle it.
Remember my own self sometimes.
Totally. But then I realized too, like, feelings are so fleeting. One of the best things that I learned is that feelings aren't facts. They're fleeting. They're moments in time. And if I make space for them, they rarely stay as big. I mean, I'll have an argument with my husband and something where I'm like, I am so right. He is so wrong. This is so real. And then, like, my nervous system down regulates a little bit. It doesn't feel so fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And I come back and I'm like, oh, I was wrong, like, about easily half of this. These were just big feelings. And now I can see your perspective now that I'm not flooded. Now
Yeah.
that I, was heard and validated, right? I can let go of the rope a little and not tug so hard. And so I try and remember that when I'm having a really big feeling of like, yeah, it's a feeling. You're a human. It will pass.
Yeah, and on that note, like in the past, so for I don't know, I was very reactive for a long time, and I now am not reactive. If someone comes at me, or says something that's like below the belt, or even affects my feelings, not even intentionally, I pause, I sit with it, and I wait till I'm not like elevated to have the conversation because I know myself and I'm not good in that sense. I don't want to say you can't take back words, right? I don't want to say something I'm going to regret. And I know that the feelings will, like you said, will downgrade. I used to be like just right away attack mode, just to defend myself or whatever. And I have softened up so much in that way, which I'm so grateful for because I don't have to do that.
Yeah. It's so much easier than cleaning up the mess, right? I mean, that's what I'm an efficiency person, and I know when I let them out one when I'm really upset. I still do it sometimes, right? We're human. I mean, I have arguments with probably the safest, closest people to me where I'm like, "Ugh, Duquette, you did it again. Like, go fix that." And I've had the experience more recently now having, more people joining my Instagram. I've had a couple people that come in real hot and I'll have that feeling like, why are you coming at me? Like, what is, I thought I was being really nice or really this. And I know I've shifted
You are.
probably,
You're
I
being
mean,
nice. You're being
I
nice. It's not you. I'm just going to tell you.
thank you. Who doesn't like hearing that? I'm sure you've worked with people who are, detoxing, struggling. And I've had that frame of reference that people are doing the best that they can. And I've had a few people come in where I'll be honest, I'm a human. I have an initial reaction of like, how dare you, that feeling. And then I'm like, okay, this person's in a lot of pain. And I'm just the place it got pointed to at that moment. And I've done the same thing, right? Having a bad day, something struggling, someone triggers something, and then it comes
Cuts you
out. And
off
so
on the highway on the 405 or the 101.
oh, I always say I'm a really nice person until someone cuts me off without using their signal, and then all the bad words come out and the stuff. And I'm like, who am I? Like,
All the stuff that was going on that day comes out on that person. No, but like this, so like just to touch on that, like just protect. I'm just speaking because of this. I go through this often. Like protect yourself and like this morning I had something this morning, so I'm just going to share a little bit about it because we're on it. I had a gentleman, I guess, reach out to me earlier in the year and send me the link to his podcast and asked me if I would do it. And I wrote back, I said yes. And I shared a meme and they said something about like losing somebody and they had to remind them. So there was like some back and forth. And then I put as my like subject, like my social media is not like for me, it's not just about branding or marketing my business or who I am anymore. This is an extension of me and who I am and sharing my emotions and authenticity with the world. So I put, my social media is an extension of my authenticity. And this person wrote back, well, why don't hold on, I'm actually going to read it just because this is the stuff that I have to deal with. And
receipts. I love it.
Times it's not, if it's like this, I don't take it personal, but when it's something that hits my heart, I do. So it said, you said you were down to do my podcast in the new year. I messaged you about joining my podcast. You wrote me back, Happy New Year. Be more authentic and tell everyone it depends on how many followers you have. And I was like, I said, I'm still open to it. I'm confused by your message. Were you being unkind or is that being translated incorrectly through the message? I have a bit on my plate. I'm hardly making my own commitments. And then I read it again. I go, oh no, he was being mean. So I just blocked him. You know what I mean? So like, I look back, did I do something? No, that's not me. But I had somebody recently just go off and like verbally assault me that I haven't seen in 8 years in a message over something really hard and heavy. And that one hurt me. So we're human beings and we're putting ourselves out there and we're women and we're dealing with mental health and addiction. You know what I mean? So we're going to get.
And it's hard. Do you overcommit? I overcommit. I take on so many things because I love saying yes. And then I'm like, oh gosh, I actually have to do this. And I will tell you, you reached out to me and I had maybe 4,000 or 5,000 followers at the time. So I know from experience because I was like, I think I looked at when the message, because we had communicated a little bit, on each other's pages, I think. But then I saw the message and I'm like, am I being punked? Is this spam? If I click on this, am I gonna my whole account? So I saw, you meet with a variety of different people. And I think I try and remember it's not easy, but is trying to assume the most generous thing. Like if somebody forgets an appointment, if somebody says yes to something and then has to backtrack or schedule it further in advance. Like we're all running multiple businesses, multiple little areas. And you're a parent, right?
Yeah,
So
I have an 11-year-old and an 18-year-old. I'm
yeah.
pretty full, and
Oh,
I just had puppies a few months ago. So I
oh,
did respond to this gentleman. Like, yes, I would be love to do it, but there was never any conversation after that. So I think maybe, and maybe because I had a couple people on recently that had higher numbers of followings, but I also had people with 500. And so it's not about that. It's for me, it's about human connection and who I bond with, who I connect with, who I want to lift up, who can lift me up. It's a plethora. It's more about connection than anything is about anything else for me.
right.
You know?
And you said this is a relationship, this is an extension of yourselves. And I kind of have the mantra with people, whether it's friends, whether it's, when people are dating, that I don't chase anyone anymore. If it's for me, it will, I'll put it out there. And if someone keeps coming back or reminds me, then I know they're interested and they're on it. And, so yeah, if you don't hear from someone for a while, I think it's a lot of things get talked about. If they come to fruition, it's because everyone was kind of on the same page, the same vibe at the same moment. And
Yeah, I think you and me had connected before you would even had made videos. And I really just like the stuff you were putting out there and how thoughtful and mindful your responses were. They weren't just a quick sentence. You really took time to you know what I mean? I'm like, this woman is awesome. And I knew that from right away. And
yeah,
so that's why I wanted to, and I one thing I do is for women or anybody, men, women, stepping into this space and that are putting out quality information. Because if you go on TikTok, you can find some really awful stuff about mental
yeah,
health, or even on Instagram, or just some very personal things that people may have created in their own head that are not. You're putting out actual, real things that can help people. I want to lift you up. I want you to I want to do that for other people. I want to help.
yeah.
This is the collective social media become a better place. It's one of my missions. I
Right.
want
And I was drawn to you because of your work, your legitimate, physical work with people and what you do, and background and education in the field. Because I love that social media has brought mental health awareness, and I think it's hugely helping reduce the stigma of seeking help. There's a whole sober movement growing because people are talking about hey, we can have a good time without drinking. Hey, not every social occasion needs to include alcohol. Hey, stop asking people why they're not drinking. It's weird, And I think there's so much good information, but we know there's also some so-so information. But a lot of practitioners are afraid to use this space because we have our ethics, we have our laws, we have the things that we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to do therapy on Instagram per se. And I know myself, I wanted to create a space where, as a practitioner and someone who has background, who has education, who follows my, legal and ethical codes, I can provide really good information that helps people. Not that I think you have to be a doctor or a licensed clinician to be able to have a place in this community, but it helps provide that kind of the being able to vet some of the information that's out there with people who've already had to really learn things and get licensed and pass tests. And again, not the end all be all, but I
Yeah,
think there's
important.
space.
In my company, we always have a licensed clinician involved in every case. It's a very important thing. I don't provide therapy. I might know a lot about this stuff, but I'm not you. I'm not the Dr. Hutman that's our clinical director. I'm not Dr. Aldo Morales, who's my psychiatrist. It's very important to have qualified, well-trained. And if people knew what professionals actually went through to become a licensed clinician, it is like becoming a doctor before you have your PhD, just to become a master's level clinician, the work that you go through.
And to be an interventionist, like I know a little from watching people and the people I partner when we're in treatment teams working with, a complex case, but I don't know how to do that. So finding the people, I mean, that's one of the interesting things about the field of psychology in general and recovery is you can't know everything. It's so big. It's so that we all have our own little corners, things that we're interested, maybe based on our own background, our own experiences, and then what we are naturally good at or gravitate towards.
Yes,
And
collaboration is amazing.
oh,
My mom was a psych RN too, so I was like raised around psychiatric mental health. My mom does some work for us on our team. She ran a
mhm.
psych unit as an admissions nurse. So I was raised knowing every psych medication, all mental health diagnoses. So I was raised around that, but it also was just like a natural thing for me to be in this realm. But it's just so important to have professionals like you putting out the content you're putting out. I want to go back. I want to talk about, because I know there was some people that really like were chiming in about this topic. So I think because I know you have a session, I'd like to talk about a few specific pains. Maybe we can
Yeah.
each pick a couple that we want to talk about and talk about how they can be catalysts for growth. So I'd love for you to pick a specific area of pain that maybe people go through that can be a catalyst for growth. Because I have the first thought of the one in my head, but I want you to go first.
Yeah, there's a lot of areas. I'm not sure I can just pick one, but we'll see where it goes, right?
One at a
Um,
time.
I I think that I think reinventing yourself, change is one of the hardest things for me. I'll tell you, I know you've gone through some professional changes, as have I, and I think lack of control and pain can and change and transformation are some of the biggest ones. Like I always say, in spite of the fact that I try hard things all the time, because I always tell people skate a hard program, if you're not making mistakes and failing, you're not doing enough new things. But
Yes.
I will be the person who, even when it's positive change, I will spend a little bit of time sucking my thumb in the corner, crying curled up in a ball, fighting it, each
I'm
leg,
nurtured in that way.
and I get to the other side and I'm good and it's exciting and I like doing things that are challenging, but I have to go through the paces every time. And then I think grief. For those of us who've had pretty significant trauma histories in general, I work with a lot of people that come from, have a pretty significant child trauma
Yeah.
background. And I think that's one of the things that I find the most interesting, because when we're children, we literally don't have the executive function or emotional bandwidth to understand what's happening to us. And what I see with a lot of clients, and myself as well, is we get into adulthood and we're so confused. And we bring with us that little piece of us that didn't understand it. And we may understand it as an adult going, hey, listen, my parents were deeply injured people too. And, they were doing the best they could. And we had these other things going on, but there's this child part of you that's like internalizes it. I'm hard to love. I'm not worthy of being protected.
Yeah.
I am, too much, too sensitive to whatever. And so those are kind of my big things, because I think childhood trauma is so impactful, because we absorb pain at the very moment where we had none of the resources to change our circumstances or know what to do with it. And so a
And it's
lot
on
of the work I do
a
is,
level. It's it being on a cellular level and sometimes not knowing what that is. Like how many people are walking around with unresolved trauma that they don't even know and will probably never get an opportunity to heal. Like I had such big traumas, right? So I was sexually molested. I had my younger sister, when we finally got away from the abuser, was abducted by him and brought to another country. And I watched my mom get domestically abused for 3 years, ages 4 to 7. I remember it all very vividly, very clearly. And that stuff is in me. I used to think that in my recovery and in my healing process, that eventually I'd like get my trauma worked on and put in a box and put over here. And then finally the day that I realized, Amanda, no, it's gonna come up. This is a journey. It's not a destination. It's never going to be put there. It's going to come up in different ways. And it's okay that it's going to be a lifelong journey of healing, because you know what to do when it comes up, and that was because I kept thinking, oh, once I do all this work on this trauma work, it's going to be good. It's going to be here and done. No, and that's okay.
right? I think we tend to think of like, okay, I've disclosed, I've talked about it, I had a therapist, I've worked on these things, and then,
Trauma
it comes.
retreats, all the stuff.
Oh, for me, it was like, "Oh, I've handled this, I should be done," right? And then I had children, and I'm like, each stage they're in, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like, why wasn't I protected?" Or what were they thinking? Like some of the things, and it's sort of like you go through it over and over again, and again, you build that capacity to know that, like, I will be okay, like, this happened. I always say, I hate when people, it's a pet peeve of me when people go into toxic positivity or sort of emotional bypassing and say, but Chris, it made you the person you are. Or, when God closes a door, they open a window, or everything happens for a reason. Though
No, not
I
all things.
really,
Yeah,
I would
not all.
really love to know who I would be without the trauma. Like,
Yeah,
oh, would I have a nervous system that works? Would I be a better sleeper? Would I be a little more patient? Would I handle change better? Would I maybe be less of a perfectionist with things? So I I'm not one of those people that I think pain makes us who we are in a good way. I would never choose any of the things that happen to you
no,
or happen to me or the other people I know to happen to anyone else. I
no,
think they're just injuries, full stop. But I do know that those experiences have made me empathetic, have made me not afraid of sitting with people in their darkest moments because I'm like, hey, this can be different.
yeah, that's
They've made me
place for
really
me.
careful about protecting my children. I have more knowledge and more information.
How old are your
Pardon?
kids? How old are your
Uh,
kids?
I have a 16-year-old daughter, I have a 20-year-old daughter, and I have a 23-year-old son.
Awesome. Okay.
So it's the gamut. Yeah, they're almost all to adulthood, and they're all fully formed, deeply good people at this point. And but parenting is the hard thing. I remember Barb, Barb, who I will always talk about. I think she's definitely retired now. But she always told me I'd come into therapy with parenting issues, like, oh, Barb, I said this, I did this, and shame, and how do I work through this? And she's like, oh, Chris, if you don't like making mistakes, man, you got into the wrong game with kids because you're going to make them every single day.
Oh yeah, because when I was pregnant with my son, I was terrified because I was abused, and what I went through, I thought that meant I was going to be an abuser. I was 23 years old. I did not understand it. I felt like I had a very warped perception of everything, and I was terrified to have a kid, right? And now, with certain things that I used to say, my only goal in life is not to mess up my kids. Okay, my only goal, my goal with my parenting is to not mess them up too bad, because I'm going to mess them up in some ways, but to provide them with like emotional stability, safety, love, support, and it's definitely, I'm sure you relate, but like as my son is shifting, he's a senior in high school, graduating, to letting him be adult and make adult choices now and not have to run everything by me. At first, I was so offended. He changed jobs and didn't tell me. And I was like, Merrick, that's weird, And I'm like, but like, no, he's 18. Like he can do that. And that's a hard, so it's all, I just don't want to mess with my kids too bad. I want to give them the support system for what I do mess up with that I can take ownership of, and we can get through it together.
Yeah. Oh, one of my favorite things to talk about is repair, because I think that when I look back on my childhood and what happened and what I wanted to do different, one of the things that is, I apologize to my kids at least once a week, and
Yeah,
modeling that they can apologize. I mean, we don't learn, right? If your parents don't, and sometimes it's because they're not able to or they haven't learned, because generational trauma is a thing. But if we can learn to apologize, we can fix anything. I mean, the people that we love in our life, we will injure them, whether we
yeah,
want to or not. We don't know where every single pain point is. I always tell my kids, like, I so wish I could have come to you as a fully formed person, but I am a work in progress and I will be the rest of my life. But being able to be accountable when you make a mistake and say, hey, listen, I'm working on this. I'm
I did. I
sorry.
told,
I
yeah.
hurt you.
Yeah, I told my kids when I left my daughter's dad, I told them that they were allowed to share their upset and frustration with me, and like I was totally fine with that, but they couldn't be disrespectful in the manner. Like you can be mad at me, you can be your feelings are valid, and then like recently when I was struggling with my son transitioning to an adult, I told him like, honey, this is just so you know, this is hard for me. Like I know how to mother you. I'm trying to let you make your own decisions, and I'm working on this too. You know. So we have those very open dialogue. And my 11-year-old, forget it. Her emotional intelligence will blow some 40-year-olds out of the water. Like I am like, who are you sometimes? You know, parenting is just the greatest teacher, you know, it is so beautiful.
It is, and the connection and the love that you can build, but it's hard, right? And it's like,
Oh,
this is where being able to sit with pain and discomfort, feel our feelings, reach out for help and community and support, right? Because like,
yeah,
I know one of the difference for me is when I'm struggling with something with my kids and maybe something in my own experience gets triggered, I don't go to them first and ask them to manage my feelings. I go to you, or I go to my other friends that are parents, or my husband, or my therapist, and say, like, I'm struggling, or I'm feeling some resentment popping up, or I feel left behind. Like they needed me for so long and now they don't need me. What do I do with that? I don't make my
yeah,
kids responsible for those adult feelings of normal
totally.
transition.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. We're very open in this household, which I'm grateful for, you know, and they know that mom is solid and has their back, you know. So the area of pain I wanted to talk about, which is a lot, I think it doesn't get enough attention. I think it's starting to now, is for people that are heartbroken, people that get their heart broken. Um, I was somebody that, God, I just couldn't relate to it. And I didn't have a lot of empathy or sympathy for it until I went through it.
Yeah.
I feel like that pain and that change and that growth can be really, it can like break people, but it can also change their life and healing. I'm sure you deal with clients that are going through heartbreak, whether it's, through a romantic relationship, a friendship, whatever it may be. Um, if you could share how sometimes pain can be a catalyst for growth, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? I have my own experiences of family relationships and my own experience of probably, dating every wrong person until I met my partner. And I think, the heartbreak piece is, again, whether it's a romantic relationship or any important relationship or like valued friendship,
Because I
sometimes it's
feel them, I feel them the same. Just so like I used to only be heartbroken by friendships before I was ever romantically truly
yeah.
heartbroken. So they are the same to me as far as value and pain.
And I think it comes down to grief, right? And a lot of times we're grieving, um, we personalize things too. So we think if someone moves on, it's that something's wrong with us. And that's something we weren't doing enough. We weren't giving them what they need. And sometimes it's just not for us, right? Which is easy to say when you're in a relationship or when your business is working and you've come to the other side of a major transition. But most of us, especially if we're doers and caretakers, will take someone wanting to move on as a symbol that something, we're not doing something right, versus just the
Not
natural
good enough.
evolution.
I'm not good looking anymore. I'm too much. All the ways that we can beat ourselves down. It's
And
about
it's
us.
almost never about us.
Yeah.
I think that is the childhood wound a little bit sometimes coming up, that it has to be something we did because we're sort of the center of our own universe. I also think that there's that element of, when we're grieving a relationship that didn't work out for one reason or another, sometimes we're not even grieving that person, right? We're grieving what we projected, what we thought it was going to be. And if you're a future thinker, I mean, I don't know about you, but before I go to bed at night, like, I imagine all the ways my life could go if I could do these things, and you know, uh, all different versions of it. And that's great because sometimes it's really positive and at least it counterbalances, the worst case scenario, which I also will think about right before I go to
Yes.
bed.
Oh, you're just
But
like me. We got to talk about that on a side note because I come up with the whole ways for the world before bed.
completely. And then when it doesn't happen that way, too, it can be grieving. I mean, I know, thank goodness I didn't get the relationships I thought I wanted in my 20s.
That's
Thank
powerful.
goodness. What is it? Rejection is protection.
It is
And
so true.
I cried in my bathtub. Did the ugly cry of like, they don't like me, they don't this. Thank goodness I was not limited to only the things that I could think of. But in that moment, it's rejection. And I
Right.
think realizing that sometimes when we are heartbroken, sometimes legitimately we're heartbroken, right? Like we miss the connection, the person, or we're going through something really difficult, or we have a family relationship that's not working to the point where, we take space and it doesn't feel good, even if it's the best thing for us. Um, and I think, but that so much of the time, what we're grieving is what we thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
And, that's the
Yes.
big human brain of ours.
Yeah. The
We have,
fantasy princess
oh,
story.
totally. Like, oh, this person, I mean, I remember having a boyfriend that was very good on paper. He had a life, and I was thinking, oh, well, we're going to be doing this, we're going to do that. This is what our kids will look like. This is what, and like, so when it didn't work out, I had to go back and tell myself, Chris, you were dating for 2 months. You don't even know who this person is yet. You have lost nothing but this idea and if somebody had told me, at 20, like, here's what your knight in shining armor is going to look like, here's the path it's going to take, here's the baggage it's going to come with, I would have been like, no, thank you. No, that doesn't. And here I am. And so I think we have to trust to some extent. I tell clients once in a while when they're going through a deep grief moment, if your life is a book, and you can get to, let's skip ahead, and we can't know all the things. But if you can get to the final page of your book and it says, uh, Amanda was in her last moments, Amanda was surrounded by the people she loved, and she was at peace, and she did all the things that she wanted to do, or most of the things. And she was surrounded by the people she loved. Like, can that be enough? And I always get the like tinglies from that, because it's like, I hope my story ends that way. The
Totally.
pages in between now and then, I have no idea what it's going to look like. And it's
No, and
probably gonna be so much better and so much harder than I can
yeah,
think of right now.
it is. It is, and like I know that when and it's happened so many times in the past few years. Like my professional recent things. Like
Yeah.
was getting invested in, and was going through this whole long process to kind of be able to take a little bit of step back, and then to finding out that the same day that Blake was going to be leaving that day, I knew it was going to happen eventually, but it was so much that I was like not ready for. But I'll tell you, we're still super close, him and I, and I'm thriving. But we're doing better than ever, and I'm feeling also reignited with passion. So like I could have never chose this for myself if I didn't. Like I left a marriage. I was with him, my daughter's father, for 10 years. He was an amazing man. He's still one of my best friends. He's an amazing father. I just, things had changed for me internally, and I was doing it for everybody else but me for years. And I left that marriage and I got in another relationship, fell deeply in love, got heartbroken. But it also wasn't the person for me or the right fit, right? It was also me thinking, oh, well, I left my marriage and now I figured it out. Now I know what I'm doing and what's going on. And then the rug kind of getting taken out of me also propelled all the other stuff, right? Going through the divorce, that leaving,
Mhm.
all of the things came into that moment. But if I didn't go through all of those things, the relationship and the man that I've found in my life today, I wouldn't have appreciated him the way I do. I wouldn't have been as clear
Right?
on what I want. And he meets all of my needs and then some, and like beyond. He's more than better than I could have ever imagined or chose myself. And he found me randomly, and it was like I was open for it because I was really crystal clear on what I wanted and didn't want.
Yeah. And
Because
you
of what
bring up, I think, one of the most important parts about pain and growth is that we don't grow and change when we're comfortable. It's just human nature, right? Like the status quo, when things are working, we don't try new hard things. And so sometimes those experiences, again, I don't want to ever tell someone that their trauma or the things that they went through were good for them, because we know,
or
like, sometimes bad things just happen and we just have to pivot. But I
yeah.
know for me, like, I didn't become the things I am and do the things I do, the things I'm proud of today, because my life was comfortable. It was because I felt insecure, because something was missing, because, I felt inferior in some way. I mean, I always laugh and tease, when people are like, oh, you're a doctor, like, that's so impressive. And I'm like, I'm not a doctor. I didn't go get a doctorate because I'm a secure person. Like I didn't go do that because I felt great about myself. I did that to bolster that feeling of like, look, I'm good enough. I'm good enough. Like,
Right.
and so we don't change when things are easy. And it sucks, right? Because when
Yes.
things fall apart, it's the very moment where we're like, really life, really like I was just coasting and things were okay. But then and we're not the people we need to be in those moments. We have to stretch and grow, and that hurts. It's painful, you know.
Wow.
I'm a person who, goes to the gym 3 days in a row, and I'm like, how come I don't have muscles? And I think emotional growth is the same thing. It's uncomfortable, but sometimes that dark night of the soul, sometimes that bottom that we talk about in recovery, like we won't we won't go do hard things until it hurts more to sit where we are than it
I
does the
feel that on a
pain.
deep level. I feel that on a deep level with so many things in my life.
Right?
And sometimes I don't know if anyone can relate to this that's watching, but when you get hit with change after change after change after change, you just kind of get like, I got to a point, I was like, it was 11/11, November 11th of last year. I hit a point where I was like complete surrender because it was so much that I was trying to fight it. I was just like, this one day, okay, this one day, I lost my stepmom. I got I got COVID. It was me and my boyfriend's 1 year anniversary, and I delivered puppies in my bedroom with COVID, with my boyfriend, with my ex-husband who had never spent time together, and my kids. It was like the most wild, crazy, chaotic day, but it was like a moment of like it broke me down to be like, whatever, let's go with it.
Right?
It's a
I
lot
mean,
easier.
one of those days you couldn't write. If you wrote it, someone would be like, this is totally unbelievable. It's over the top. It's, yeah.
Not
And
possible.
you figure it out. And then like that, I think gets you ready for the next thing because, I mean, sitting here, we both know, right? We're going to have other moments. I don't think you can have, you have kids. And I was talking to a friend of mine who has adult children a little bit older than mine. And she has one of her children is going through divorce. And it like hit me the rest of the day. I'm like, my kids are going to struggle with things I can't even fix or protect them from. And
Or
I had a whole
fathom yet. You can't even fathom them, you know.
and I'm like, oh, I had an existential day, like a whole day where I was like in that kind of panicked feeling where I'm like, oh, I got to get ready for this next stage. And I'm like, Mama, you'll figure it out just like you figured out all these other things. But yeah, sometimes it's going to hurt. And I think that's why I don't believe that therapy or counseling or, recovery is the only way to get to those things. But man, is it nice to have someone hold your hand while you're going through things and someone light the way. That's why I know I love people like you. And, I've experimented with my own, like how much of my own story do I share? Because, we also want people to think we're competent and know how to do things and that it's not, always navel gazing.
Yeah, it is. It's scary, especially for when you have a license, to be too,
It is.
you know. Um, but yeah, it's a very interesting journey.
Well, when we share those things, I think I know when I've shared with clients and I'm a much more directive and I didn't like the experience of therapy, when I would ask a therapist a personal question and they would say, I would say like, "Oh, are you married?" And they would say, "Why is it important for you to know that?" And it's like, okay, I have trust issues from growing up. Like I need to know things.
Yeah,
And
that's
so I'm not quite an open book. I'm a more careful sharer than I used to be. But I think when people like you and I, that probably appear very competent, very capable to other people, can open up a little bit of a glimmer of like, hey, we still struggle. I get anxious. I was nervous before this. That we normalize that this is just a people thing. We all have a competent, capable, brave side, and we all have a sucking our thumb in the corner going, why did I say I'd do this? And
just
that normalizes.
doesn't mean that we don't struggle
Yeah.
at
Oh,
all.
it's like the duck. You look like you're smooth on the surface and then underneath, you're pedaling really fast trying to figure it all out.
Totally. I try to always make that be like known. Like, listen, like I do what I do and I'm passionate about doing what I do and I love helping people. But like I still struggle. I still have to do all the things myself that like I help other people do. And if I do have a client that I'm, working with, like have to do something, like I sometimes will make me self-reflect and be like, oh, I need that too. You know what I mean? Like I have to practice what I preach too, right?
Oh,
you
The
know?
amount of times I'm like, I really need to take my own advice and start
Yeah.
breathing and doing some of these things. Let me ask you, Amanda, when you're, because I know you've got a lot of skills and tools at this point, and you've worked with other people. When you struggle and are stuck, going through the shifts in your business that you've gone through, what do you lean on? What helps you in those
Yeah,
moments?
no, great question. I have a therapist I've been with for 3.5 years. I started with her on Zoom. We've only actually met in person once, which if you would have told me years ago, I've been in therapy since I was 7, on and off, I would have told you no way. But she's my girl. I love her. She gets me. She knows me. So I do that once a week, except for when traveling. And then I have so many amazing people in my life that kind of like, if it's depends on what it is, like who would be the
Mhm.
go-to for that. We're very close within my company, but in the shift of the partnership with Blake, one of the things I realized is him and I were so close and so intertwined that he came down too many dark rabbit holes with me that I'm trying to separate that from my team, you know what I mean? Because we're like very close. We support one another. We make sure each other are taking time off and breaks and like all that stuff. So that's still good. But I have my go-to people. I love to be in nature. I just went on a retreat alone to Costa Rica for a week. Um, I exercise, I have puppies, I spend time with the dogs, the kids, like shutting off social media for a week and just having Yasmin, my social media manager. So there's a lot of ways that I do. And I sometimes sit and cry and stay in bed and watch TV.
Yeah.
Like right
I
now,
told my
I'm trying to do a lot of hard paperwork stuff with my boyfriend to do something that we're doing. And like, I hate that stuff. I hate paperwork and looking for things and having to send in stuff. And it cringes me. And I was being like bitchy and shutdown mode because it's like my least favorite thing to do.
yeah. Well, it's tax time, and every client comes to session is like, I should really be working on my taxes. And I'm like, no, trigger warning, don't say taxes, because then I have to think about mine. And so, yes, the paperwork stuff can definitely get in the way, and like leaning on people like that separation. My husband and I are very well partnered. And, as we both get into midlife, we are each other's person, and that can be great. Except of course when we're not getting along, and we haven't, both of us probably haven't done as good a job of nurturing friendships and spending that same time, because we're busy people. When we have time, we tend to want to spend it together.
Totally.
And, we've been working on that. Like, it reminds me a little bit of you and Blake. Like if you're each other's person a lot at the work thing, when you need that separation, it's a little bit harder. So we learn
Yeah.
the lessons along the way, and we keep, I always say not trial and error, but trial and learn. Like we try something and then we learn from it and we shift it a little bit and do something a little different.
Yeah, my partner Phil, my boyfriend for the past year and a half, has been such a breath of fresh air because he is like very comfortable, confident in who he is, and I'm never too much for him. He says that I'm a breath of fresh air, which is like cool. You're my person. But he's not in recovery. He doesn't work in this industry that I work in, and I had only been with people in recovery or in the
Yeah.
mental health industry for the past 15 years. So it's so nice to have someone that I can share my stuff with, but is not in it. And so
Yeah.
there's a separation. And it's been really, really good for me. Because he like knows how to support me and show up for me. And he's very consistent. So like there's some, but I don't bring everything and put everything to him. You know what I mean? I try to handle my stuff too that I need to handle in my own ways. But there's certain things that like he's great to be there for, and he's not attached to any of it, which is lovely.
Yeah. I think I think it was something you posted, or maybe I posted from somebody else. Who knows? I can't keep track of it, but something about, finding someone who regulates your nervous system. And
Yes,
I always say,
you posted that. You posted
yeah.
that, and I
And
relate
that,
so much.
oh, like it doesn't have to be. I mean, I know in my 20s I was never attracted to the bad boys. That wasn't really my thing, but definitely like big personalities or very charismatic or very exciting. And yeah, with age, and that is one of the good things about going through things, you do, to me, like practical, earnest, you do what you say you're going to do. And I always laugh and say, my husband is the he's the golden retriever to my cheetah. When they have like cheetahs that are really high strung at the zoo, they put in a dog with them to calm them down. And that,
That's
people who can help us regulate our nervous system are some of the best people to be around.
Amen. And for people like you and I, it sounds like we both need that.
Yes, yes. I need someone who's calm because I'm definitely not a calm. I can be calm, but I'm
No,
definitely
I can be a lot, but I think you were very, just everything you explained, I relate to so much. So before we hop off, what anything you'd like to just say to anyone that may be listening, followers, of, if you're going through pain, the catalyst for growth, like our topic, or just any kind of last words, and then we'll talk about how to find you.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of things we can do on our own, but I do think it's also important to know when to reach out for more help. Obviously, I think that I believe in therapy. I've gone to therapy. I am a therapist. I think reaching out and finding someone that's a good fit for you. I think community recovery supports and can be, because therapy is not accessible to everyone. One of the realities of mental health care is I think just talk to somebody. And a lot of times, we can't learn and we can't change in the same situation we're in. So I'm a big fan of find a mentor, find a therapist, find a friend, find a sponsor, just someone to light the path a little bit and know that it is temporary. Pain certainly doesn't feel temporary when you're smack dab in the middle of it. But when things are really good, enjoy it because things change. And when things are really bad, hang on, it changes. And, social media again, like fill your feed up. I think social media is wonderful, but I always go through kind of an Instagram cleanse once in a while where, I take off the things that aren't making me feel good and I try and cultivate a group of people that I like seeing the stuff. Maybe it challenges me a little, but not, it's not stuff that's going to make me feel bad about where I am now, and reach out to people. I mean, we've talked about it. I know other guests you've had on have talked about it that, we're real people. I can't necessarily field, 50 requests for help in the same day, but, reach out till the person's ready. I've responded personally to people. I've had people respond personally to me when I'm going through something. Don't stop trying. The person you will find someone who has the bandwidth for you at the moment and who couldn't be happier than to help you, at least point you in the right direction. And hang on. It's all pretty temporary, and reach out for help and tell people you need help. I mean, I'm guilty of this too. When I'm struggling, is I expect people around me to notice that I am not doing so well, but I don't project that. So,
Yeah,
sometimes whether it's a partner or a colleague and friend, you have to say like, hey, Amanda, I could really use a pep talk because I'm feeling terrible today. Like, I don't know how to do this. And most of us, when someone asks, will do our best to show up for that person and whatever, or give them to a person who has the bandwidth that day. But
absolutely.
ask for help. Tell people you're not okay. We're humans. None of us are okay all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then also give people grace that you are asking for help if they don't are able
Yeah.
to respond right away.
Yeah.
But just I'm not sure if you're aware, like that we do that next level, we do the interventions, the 24/7 recovery companions or wellness companions. We have to do comprehensive case management. So oftentimes if people are working with you, say as their therapist, and say they need something in between the sessions, like they need that extra support, like we have coaching that can be and then communicate, like if you're working on say heavy trauma with someone, coaching can be like, hey, I know we know you had some heavy sessions, like we just want to check on you, see how you're doing, do you need any support, do you need any recommendations for some kind of, like, we believe in all the pathways, right? 12 steps, she recovers, any kind of support meeting, group therapy, religion, adventure, whatever is your thing, like let's help you figure it out and find your people, your community, and your support system. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
That's so
all.
great. Who among us can't use more support, right?
Oh, I can. I mean, I told Matt, our new chief heart officer, I'm like, temporarily, like, you're going to be, because he's very, like, very rigid and not very rigid. He's very structured, the more positive way.
Yeah.
And I reach out to him when I'm struggling with getting on a routine or when I'm struggling, and he helps support me. Like, I know my people for what I need. So how can people find you, Dr. Chris Duquette, who you're a beautiful soul. I'm so grateful that you spent this time with me today, but I'd love for people to be able to find you you're on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. Chris Duquette. I am on Instagram at Dr. Chris Duquette.
Dr. Chris.
At Dr. Chris Duquette. Yeah, I'm like have to think of my own things.
Yeah.
I'm also my therapy site that needs a refresh, but I've been busy with my Instagram, is www.therapyhb.com, and people can find me that way. I do see new clients. I don't take new people on very often because I tend to see people long term, but there's always possibilities, and that's part of why I'm on Instagram, which is probably the best place to find me, just because it's my attempt to still be able to reach a ton of people, in spite of the fact that I'm only one person and I can't see 50 people a week.
I love
Or
I love that. That's a great mission.
yeah.
What did you find? Just a quick question. Did you find it weird when you started making videos and just like talking to your phone? Was that weird for you?
Oh, totally. It still is. And it's funny, I've done it enough that now, speaking to you, I was a little nervous at first. And I'm like, I interview people all the time. I'm a professor. I do this a lot. I do lots and lots of Zooms. And I'm like, Chris, you know how to do this. But now, and then speaking in
Sure.
90-second sound bites, like being brief, I am probably one of the most chatty, verbose. I will go on and find another tidbit. So it's forced me to be more succinct, which I am clearly still working on. But like I come from a background in advertising and marketing and television work early in my career. And like I always thought it was hard to write a commercial for 60 seconds. And now I'm like, I gotta say things in 15 seconds or I'm going to lose people. I got to get the hook. And yeah, it's a completely different medium, and learning
Weird.
to
It's weird when
move your yeah. And move your face. Like, I know for me, like, you see your face typically on camera, and I'm like, okay, like pretend like you're talking to someone. Or sometimes, I have one of my cats is over there, I'll talk to them and do something, or know that people are going to see it. But I know the first video I made, my husband said, oh, like the background and the noise. And I'm like, nope, I'm a super perfectionist. I have to, whether I have makeup on, whether it's the end of the day and my concealer's all wore off or the background's not so great, I have to just do this and put them
just
out
do
there
it.
because
Just do it and
yeah,
post it.
if
Don't
I
critique.
over engineer it, I would have 4 videos up by now.
100. And I worked in entertainment my whole life. So like I even, I've just filmed a couple shows. I filmed for A&E. I'm
Yeah.
fine with the whole camera crew around. That's normal for me. But me sitting home alone sometimes and just talking to my phone, it's just weird. And it definitely takes time getting used to. You have to realize that, like, yes, I am speaking this from my heart. I am speaking this to a group of people, but it's like, it definitely is a thing. And I help a lot of my therapist friends. Like, I'll go to their practices and I'm like, all right, we're going to make your first reel. And like, let's just do it and post it, and then I noticed they're doing it every week after that. But if you are struggling with like you have great stuff to share, the world needs to hear you. Like Dr. Chris Duquette has come on and just come in hot and just authentic and pure. And she's growing, really fast. And it's a beautiful thing to witness because you're amazing.
Thank you. I feel the same way about you, and I would love to do this again, whether we do it as a live or not. And please, when you're even remotely in my area, let
Yes.
me know. We'll make time to hang out because you're a good
Yeah.
egg. I could.
Up a separate call just so we can chit chat because I
Yeah.
love this and you're definitely my people. I knew that from before, but now I for sure know you're my people.
Isn't it funny when you meet someone, you resonate right away, and you're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, well, we've got this handled."
Yes, we're friends. Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
so
Thank you
much.
so much for having me and giving me an opportunity to speak to my audience and yours. And it was so lovely to see you today.
Thank you. You too. You're a beautiful soul. Really grateful for you. If you're here on LinkedIn, you can follow me, Amanda Marino Recovery, on TikTok and Instagram. And Next Level Recovery Associates is my business. And I'm on all kinds of platforms. I'd love to have your support, your encouragement. And if you ever need anything mental health related, pointed in the right direction, if I can support in any way, I'm always happy to do that. Nobody will be left with no resource if they come to me. So thank you so much, Dr. Chris, and have a beautiful day. Thanks for
You
joining
too.
Recovery Solutions.